are you, Jack? What's going on?
You
How
know,
was your
it's
week, buddy?
it's amazing how quickly the weeks go by, Seth.
It
It's
is. I mean,
Friday yet
especially when you're
again.
having fun, right?
Oh man, and am I having fun? I even went sailing, which is sort of fun.
I think we saw the pictures. Now, that
Yeah.
was you want to talk about that a little bit? What was you met Ramiro, right?
Well, the deal was he was taking his crew people out. He was teaching them a couple of things on the Angica, which is a very slick, almost luxury racing boat. And he said, Jack, come along and pretend to be the tourist from Boston, which I did. And I whined about fucking everything, Seth. Where is my cognac? It's too cold. You told me the boat wouldn't lean over. La di da di da the whole time. So I just bitched and moans. I asked him if he had his green card with him. I mean, it was just this endless stream of insults and provocative behavior because I thought that's what he was looking for, is to get them acclimatized to the tourists.
Sure. And what better example of that than you, of
I am
course.
I am perfect because
Did
I
you notice the
whine.
colors of the boat Ramiro owns?
That color is in fact copyrighted.
Yes, it is the national blue of Argentina, where he
Well,
is from.
in fact, you like to think that that's the case, that it's not. The original color when he bought it is a copyrighted color. And not from Argentina, but it is just a copyrighted color. But of course, the blue fits him perfectly.
Yeah. Now, are all colors copywritten?
I don't believe so. I believe, but all colors matter, Seth.
Well, if wow, you're going to start this. All right, let's start shitting on Israel now. Now's a good time.
That has nothing to do with
All
copyrighted
colors
colors.
matter.
Okay, sure. Okay, tell me about the Israelis. You had something.
No. I'll tell you what. I had a busy morning. I was moderating a big conference call with the Boston Planning Agency, the um, Boston Planning and Development Agency, BPDA, and I was contracted through third party to help with their microgrid integration into the city of Boston. It's timely, and the reason I mention it is because people, I guess, start to freak out when there are effective denial of service attacks against our country by foreign entities like the Russian mob or Russian government. We talked the other day about how nothing happens without Putin knowing it. If you're going to shut down the gas supply to the East Coast, gee, what a great way to make $5 million and piss off the Biden administration and to
Well,
do that.
you see,
Anyway, so
yeah, go ahead, Seth. I know
I'm
it's
just
going to
saying
be
that
long-winded. Yeah.
there are cities that are trying to accommodate for that.
How did we get on this really boring subject? Anyway, it looks like the government came out today, warned about new attacks from either domestic or foreign adversaries. Now, and they mentioned that now that COVID is starting to light up, and obviously what they're referring to is there are going to be a lot more people out and together in groups. And to me, the takeaway of that message was be careful because somebody in the United States is going to go after a soft target like a large group of people.
Yeah, you can also see that manifested if you're driving on the highways. Trump drivers are getting very aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more swerving in and out of lanes. There's a lot more people on the highways acting like assholes. And it's brutal. It's brutal. I drove down to New Hampshire the other day, and you take your life in your hands. I was thinking, Jesus Christ, I'm going to send my kid on the road in her car? No chance. I guess daddy's driving, Anybody that wants to go out on the road, you just take your life in your hands. Anyway, buddy, we have a fabulous, fun-filled show today. In the teaser, lock it in. Tommy Ahonen, my new favorite follow on Twitter, had a list that I have to give credit for and recite on the show. I adapted the list for our purposes. The reasons why. Lock in this hot take, my friend.
Okay.
Donald Trump is going to jail for the rest of his life. We promise you. Jack and Seth are going on record right now, aren't we, Jack?
We are with something.
Are you ready to make that personal guarantee?
I absolutely am, Seth. That's how much I trust you.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, you don't have to trust me. Jack, trust your own ears, my friend. Trust your own ears and your own eyes.
Well, my instincts tell me, Seth, that you need as much attention as possible, and I'm trying to provide that.
Well, that's not my need. We're talking about Donald Trump and his needs right now.
Oh,
clean
right.
sheets, Cheetos. What's his diet like now? What do you think he's eating down there in Mar-a-Lago?
Well, you know, his preference, besides for burgers, was well-done steak with French fries, and the Diet Pepsi had to be opened at the table so he heard the noise of the fizz going out of it.
Diet Coke, yeah, that's
the same reason nobody can touch his toothbrush.
It's amazing.
He's a wonderful guy.
All right, so let's just call this the Trump goes to jail thread, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Entry number 2. Entry number 1, our personal guarantee. Entry number 2, there's tons of cases. Some of them are a certainty. There are known knowns, like Michael Cohen, right? We don't know when he goes to prison. There's a ton of ongoing cases against him, but, you know, just an update, starting with certainty. Some of Trump's prison sentences are known knowns, like Michael Cohen, okay? 3, we know that Michael Cohen pleaded guilty and got a 3-year sentence, right?
Yep.
Trump was individual 1. You remember, like we were talking about individual 1 for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Right.
Trump was individual 1 in those cases.
Mm-hmm.
The person who directed the crimes. Trump is doing time for that. How much time? We don't know, but he's getting charged for it. He couldn't get charged because he was president. 4, Michael Cohen got a lenient sentence for the crime that he did with Trump, and that's the whole Stormy Daniels thing. You remember her?
How could I forget her?
Yeah. Her description, by the way, of what it was like to actually have sex with Donald Trump is something, it was like a penis, only smaller.
I love that. Didn't she also say it was like a mushroom you saw in the woods?
Yeah. It looked like a penis, only smaller.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that.
So Trump's not going to get the same sentence as Michael Cohen, right? He's going to get more. And this isn't the urgent big crimes that the feds want Trump for. This is just the bullshit petty crime, right?
You bet.
5, Cohen was in 2018. In any normal prosecution, the co-conspirators, they get prosecuted kind of immediately, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trump was president, so he couldn't have been prosecuted at that time because of presidential privilege. His trial was delayed, but it wasn't abandoned. Because we haven't heard of it for a while, and because we're so addicted to recent news-itis, we think, oh, well, you know, Donald Trump skated on the Stormy Daniels thing. He hasn't skated on the Stormy Daniels thing. It just hasn't happened yet.
Mm-hmm.
6, since he's no longer president, he will be prosecuted on the same crimes that Michael Cohen was prosecuted for and convicted, coming not first because Trump has committed bigger crimes than those.
Mm-hmm.
7, hence Cy Vance and Letitia James. And the word hence in this case means both as a consequence of and also in the future. So we know that he's going to be, as a consequence of what of Cy Vance and Letitia James are concocting now, and in the near future. Hence, it'll be happening. Hence, 8. The tax fraud case is gargantuan. The tax fraud case is estimated. Have you heard how much this thing's how much he defrauded the state of New York and the federal government for?
Well, it's over 1 million pages. I can imagine there's a bit. How much?
$250 million, Jack.
Yep.
And tax crimes never expire.
Oh, I like that.
So this case is all wrapped up in the Cy Vance stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that is nearing the stage of arrest, right?
Okay.
9. We know the New York tax case is active because the DA has said so, and they took Trump to the Supreme Court, and his tax returns from Deutsche Bank, you remember that whole thing?
Of course.
Where Trump lost twice. 10. Trump's petty criminal life before becoming president, Stormy Daniels, Deutsche Bank, and if you can call $250 million petty tax fraud, he's going to get a decade, 10 years in jail minimum for these alone. And these aren't even the big crimes, right?
Yep.
11, and here's where we get into the deep water, Jack. We know that Trump was involved in extorting Ukraine, and we know this because he admitted it on television. So the Senate Republicans, they found him not guilty, but Trump did break a series of federal laws which are now being investigated. So we also, just like we forgot about Stormy Daniels, we kind of also forgot that he broke federal laws with regard to the impeachment, and those are being investigated now. 12, Mueller tells us in his investigation, if he could have exonerated Trump, he would have, but he didn't. In Mueller's words, he sees evidence of crimes committed, but DOJ rules said you can't prosecute a sitting president. 13, we know that Giuliani's original Ukraine crimes are so severe, they raided his attorney office and his home 2 weeks ago. It's exceedingly bad for Rudy. It means that there's overwhelming evidence of Rudy's guilt that the feds already have. 14, Giuliani's rogue diplomacy. It's a whole order of magnitude greater than all of the tax evasion and Stormy Daniels shit.
Of course.
Right? So we know that Giuliani arranged for an ambassador to be fired. He did this for Putin's buddies. And at their expense. And Lev Parnas has all the receipts. So Giuliani is so utterly screwed. He was begging for a presidential pardon. Trump pardoned Manafort and Stone, but not Giuliani, one of his closest and most loyal friends. Giuliani's trial is likely to happen this year. 10-year sentence. So when Giuliani flips, which he's going to do, he brings not only devastating testimony against Trump, but also Pompeo, because at State Department, he was in on it. Bill Barr for obstruction of justice as well. It's part of the cover-up there. Manafort and Don Jr., right? This guy, Tommy Ahonen, says, expect Giuliani to be sentenced around the end of the year or early next year. he probably flips this summer. So last week on the show, we were talking about, well, what's a reasonable timeline? Like, what can we expect as a timeline for this? Well, please go ahead.
No, I wouldn't. I don't want to interrupt this soliloquy, Seth. It would just ruin the whole dynamic of the show.
It's called material, darling.
I understand. And what I really would, there's so many of these, and that most of our viewers are aware of most of them. And it's nice that you give it a form, but I think we have to get through it quickly so we can talk about the E word, extradition.
Okay. So let me just, I tell you what, let's just summarize this. Obviously, you have a hair across your ass to talk about Florida and extradition, which is fantastic. I'm perfectly willing to table this and get right to that. Jack?
Seth.
Ron DeSantis, let me just start here. Does Ron DeSantis not look like a low-rent Blagojevich?
He does. And I'm just trying to visualize what a low-rent Blago would look like, because he's pretty low-rent looking.
He really is.
Yeah, I mean the hair. So, yes, DeSantis. We had in full disclosure, Seth and I had a wonderful talk on the phone today, which I wish would have been the show, because it was hilarious, including...
Let's turn it into the show.
Okay. Including when you described, if you were living in Gaza, what you would say.
All right. So let's litigate this in public. Jack is all about hating on Zionists. Jack loads the Zionists. Understandable. Obnoxious people sometimes. Okay. So I see the cartoons of the poor Arabs chopped in half on one side of the border and the Israeli baby with the T-shirt crying on the other side, and all the soldiers are attending to the baby. That's fucking adorable. So Jack starts going on this rant about, have you seen what the Israelis are doing to Gaza? By the way, they did not invade Gaza. They led the international press to believe they had that day, but they're only pulverizing Gaza.
It was extremely clever, because they sent all the enemy down into the bunkers and then bombed the shit out of them.
Yeah.
I mean, they're clever. There's no question. I hate Netanyahu. I think he's Hitler reincarnate.
Who the fuck doesn't hate Bibi?
Oh, Bibi's a shitbag. You know that.
Fucking scumbag. But you know whose fault this is? This is Donald Trump's fault and Jared Kushner. They pushed this situation by U.S. foreign policy, which dictates everything that happens in the Middle East. So,
I agree.
blame Trump, okay?
Mm-hmm.
B, I have an idea. And I asked you this afternoon if you would give me your impressions on this idea. It's a wild, crazy thought. And I'm not sure if everybody's going to think I'm absolutely insane when I say this, but if you're outgunned 10,000 to 1 and you don't have an organized army versus the most well-funded army in the region, maybe don't lob 1,500 missiles into your neighboring country. Does that sound like a good idea, Jack?
You know what I was fascinated. You know what I was fascinated by is how few those missiles got through. Yeah. Now, is that the Patriot missile batteries that we sold them?
Sure, but if you sell something to Israel and they pay retail, they have the right to rebrand it.
It's really, truly amazing, the anti-rocket technology.
The Iron Dome.
Yes, isn't that amazing? And if they're correct or they're not lying, they stop 90% of the missiles.
Well, 90% of 1,500 is 150 left over.
You know, a lot of the ones they didn't stop landed on Gaza territory and killed people.
Good.
Yeah, well, it's as you say, and I agree with you 100%. If you're in this situation, you have limited land that's densely populated. Don't start lobbing missiles at somebody.
Don't do it.
Now, the building that comes down in Gaza, there's no question that was rigged, just like building number 7.
It's amazing to me how ignorant Palestinian foreign policy is. You're right next to the people who are the most susceptible to guilt in the world. How about nonviolent peaceful protest, you fucking idiot?
You know something? If Israel ever fought Sweden, it would really be a question of who could instill the most guilt in the other culture. Can you imagine the kind of weapons they would use? Guilt weapons.
Weapons of mass guilt.
Yes, I mean, you know what those are. Your mother used them, I'm sure, on you.
Oh. It's amazing that I can string a sentence together. I don't know if I should tell you this. This is absolutely true. This is absolutely true. I've never told you this before, but this is a true story. When I was running Penn Bay Oil, right? My mom passes away, and I hadn't checked my voicemail in a while. And I checked my voicemail, and it's a message from my mother about a week after she died.
This is like Philip Roth. Okay.
I swear to God.
Next book. Okay.
She had some stuff of mine at the house that she wanted me to move. You know, she wanted me to move stuff. You know, like it was in the attic and it wasn't hurting anybody. And she's one woman alone in this house. She wasn't moving. She wasn't doing anything. It's minding its own business in the attic. Maybe a garbage bag filled with, old clothes or whatever that I hadn't taken to Goodwill yet. Seth, it's me. I don't have much time. Could you please move the garbage bag and take it to the house? Now, she didn't die of a chronic illness, Jack. I have no idea what she was saying when she said, I don't have much time.
She probably died because you didn't call her back.
It's possible. It's possible. But she had a surgery for some kind of ulcer or some kind of gastric surgery. And the doctor said, don't lift anything. Don't move anything. Sit in bed, relax, recuperate. And my sister was checking up on her. Sure enough, she's moving stuff in her closet around. Not my stuff, her stuff. And when my sister found her, there were all sorts of bags of her clothing all over the place that she was moving around. Giant bags as big as she was.
Oh.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, talk about self-fulfilling.
Yeah, really.
Misery.
Yes.
Anyway, so that's Jewish guilt.
Yes. Okay, where were we before we started on this? I twisted
Israel,
you
Jack.
over the.
You were defending terrorists.
No, before I twisted it over to Gaza. Where were we?
Oh, we were finishing up why Trump is going to jail guaranteed.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're talking about extradition.
Yeah.
Ron DeSantis. Now,
Yeah.
as you know, and you can describe it better than I can, Ron has two options open to him now. He really does want to run for president, but at the same time, he's in the position where he can approach the vice presidency more easily if Trump were to be elected the second time.
So the Republican insiders know that Trump is not going to be the nominee in 2024. They know that he's going to be arrested. They know that his candidate is not viable. Therefore, Ron DeSantis is doing that same political calculus. Ron DeSantis is in a fantastic, wonderful position for political observers to watch, because Ron DeSantis is in the position where he can do one of two things. The first thing Ron DeSantis can do is try to prevent the extradition of Donald Trump to New York. He can technically do that as governor of Florida. Whether or not it will hold up in court, another story entirely, right?
Right.
As we know, according to Reuters, the Palm Beach police are currently strategizing about that exact same thing. How do we arrest Donald Trump? Do we coordinate with the Secret Service? Blah, blah, blah. That's option number one that Ron DeSantis has. Option number two is he can not interfere with the extradition and equivocal end of Donald Trump's political career. And that is option number two. Then Ron DeSantis has a clear runway to being the unobstructed Republican candidate for president in 2024.
Now, how wouldn't you play this like this, Seth? That I try to cover your bases. You would give Trump all the help you could at this point in at least trying or giving the appearance of trying to block the extradition, where at the same time, you obviously for your own career would be much more interested that he does get extradited to make sure that he is out of the picture.
Not everybody's paying attention to this, but Donald Trump's numbers inside the GOP are shrinking.
Well, that brings up that other point that I told you. I thought the other day, reading the news, that this third party attempt, a huge vociferous following for this, and then it just dropped out of the news.
Yeah, I wrote a letter to the editor of the Portland Press Herald day before yesterday urging Senator Collins to switch party affiliation to independent. And I also called her office urging the same thing. I suggested anybody who lives in the state of Maine call Susan Collins' office and urge her to switch to independent. Can you imagine the leverage that two independent senators in the state of Maine would have in national legislation? It would be unheard of.
Well, given the makeup of the Senate now, it would be extremely crucial if she did that, and it would help us. Otherwise, I'd rather not see her face ever again.
Well, it would also disenfranchise Joe Manchin, which I think is necessary.
That's what I'm talking about exactly, is it would neutralize Manchin.
Yeah.
Which is something we really have to pay attention to.
Yeah, we do.
So, back to Ron. So Ron is in this interesting situation because they've already been spending a lot of time discussing how to stop the extradition if they decide to. Now, to make this more interesting, as you know, Trump is 48 hours away from moving up to Bedminster for the summer. And with a Democratic governor, I wonder if he will land. He'll probably land at Teterboro, right? To make sure he doesn't touch New York soil.
I don't think it matters.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have charges. It doesn't matter where he lands. I mean, you have charges, and if he's charged, the New York and New Jersey police work very closely together frequently.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the New Jersey State Police would happily arrest him and extradite him to New York.
Right. It's interesting. So the question is, as we talked about today, is what you and I have to take a very good look at is one, where Trump, whether he goes to Bedminster, and if he does, how long he stays, and what sends him back to Florida.
Um,
or Russia?
or Russia. Or Russia. That's the question. Does he figure out a way to get out of it? Does he figure out a way to skip town and make it to Moscow? I remember his niece, the last thing she said to him, his reply to her was, "Oh, they'll never catch me." She said, "Don't let him get you." He said, "They'll never catch me."
So now we talked today too, and I suggested that there is at least one person in front of the computer at the NSA or the CIA whose whole job is to make sure they know where Donald is every second of every day. Do you still think that's not a possibility, or how do you feel about that?
I wonder if that person ever gets coffee.
Well, there may be a couple of shifts.
I can't imagine a law enforcement blunder worse than as a matter of fact, it would be the most gargantuan law enforcement blunder in the history of the globe to allow this soon to be indicted criminal to escape U.S. custody and to get to Russia.
I agree. It would be an amazing scandal.
And
But then again, so was Jeremy Epstein's death.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
However, I think we're both in agreement that the worst thing that could happen, worse even than Donald Trump getting to Russia, would be Donald Trump dying of natural causes.
I agree.
Before these trials are able to reveal what it is that really happened. Because
would it take the wind out of the sails of the investigations and the pressure on Giuliani and all these other wankers? Or
no, those are all happening. And had we been allowed to go through this list of things, you would have seen that the conclusion is that Roger Stone, for example, was involved in post-pardon bribes. Roger Stone is going back to jail, and Roger Stone's going to roll on Trump because Roger Stone has been in jail and he does not want to go back. So Rudy Giuliani is the gatekeeper to all these other prosecutions. And then there's the boy genius pedophile.
Oh, let me, Seth and I had a fun exchange today.
Gates.
Well, I told Seth that I realized that Gates still had his baby teeth, and Seth came up with the name Baby Tooth. So that's the way we're going to refer to him now.
Baby Tooth Gets.
Yes.
So Baby Tooth, he's gonna go to jail. This guy Joel Greenberg, by the way, how fantastic! Another smarmy Jew in the news. My life, it just gets richer by the moment. This guy, who's a tax collector, by the way. Jesus Christ. Can Central Casting crank these bastards out any faster?
Unbelievable.
Have you seen
a scumbag?
Have you seen an uglier collection of smarmy bastards than these people?
Seth. Amazing.
I still can't get over it. Well, this guy is, it keeps getting worse for him. This guy, Joel Greenberg, wrote a confession letter to Roger Stone confessing that they paid for, young girls to have sex with.
Why did he write it to Roger Stone?
I don't know.
That's bizarre.
Is there anything about this case that isn't bizarre?
But that's really bizarre.
I don't know why he did it.
Interesting.
I don't know why he did it. Other than ensnaring Roger Stone, who has a history of bizarre sexual activity, including wife swapping in the 80s.
Yeah, yeah,
The New York Sex
he's a
Club.
freak. He is the guy biting the heads off the chickens at the circus. The geek.
The geek.
Although I think Baby Tooth, looks more like a geek.
He does. He looks like Beavis.
Yeah.
He really does. Well,
Now,
we have another topic to cover, and it was really fruitful conversation that you and I had. What if it, we think about this guy that keeps throwing garbage on my lawn, and I have news on that too, by the way.
oh, please.
I'm at the dog park, and I meet a guy that works at Public Works who will remain nameless. And I said, "So you work at Public Works?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "Do you drive down Erin Street every day?" He says, "Yes, I do." I said, "Who the fuck is throwing garbage on my front lawn?" He says, "That's you?" I said, "Yeah, that's me." He says, "Jesus, Tim Hoppy wants to get that guy bad." I said,
No
"Yeah."
shit.
I said, "Yeah, I know, dude. I know." Then my friend Scott, he says, "Do yours have little love notes written on them?" This guy isn't limiting it to me. He's throwing fuck the N word written on coffee cups all over town. Everybody that has a Black Lives Matter sign up.
But this guy must know who he is. The Public Works Department isn't that big, Seth.
No, the guy doesn't work at the Public Works Department.
Oh,
He's some guy. We don't know who he is.
but he is getting up early every day and going to Dunkin' Donuts, which means he probably is working somewhere. It could be the boatyard, right?
The Trap Company.
Yep.
Could be a bunch of places.
So if anybody watching has any idea who this could be, call Mr. Hoppy at the chief
At the
of police.
Thomaston Police Department. Yeah.
Yes.
Chief Hoppy will be happy to interview you about a guy who is, it's just another. Oh, and by the way, I received another gift yesterday morning. Losing lotto tickets again. It's my favorite garbage that this guy throws in my driveway. It's literally, I'm a loser.
Yes. Oh, I love it. I absolutely. You should make a collage and put it in the Museum of Modern Art and call it Thomaston Man.
Loser.
Loser.
I'll just call it loser.
I like that. Yeah.
Just staple them to it. Staple the cup and the tickets to a white piece of paper and just write loser. Mouth breathing, white trash loser. Speaking of Long Island Expressway, trailer park, Long Island Expressway truck stop hookers. Elise Stefanik is the new minority leader.
I know. Isn't that amazing? Now, why did the Republican senators go over to the White House to visit with Biden the same day they can Cheney?
They were invited, and I noticed that the tone that Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell had after that visit was decidedly more bipartisan.
I know. Now, did Donald comment on that? He must have seen it.
I don't know how we could have found if Donald commented on it because he has no access to social media. He has a blog. Oh, and by the way, if you haven't heard, Jack, that he has a blog, you're not alone. Apparently, nobody has heard that he has a blog. It's not getting any traction. I'm telling you, this guy's voice is evaporating into the ether.
Interesting.
But this latent authoritarianism is still very present in the GOP.
So, is it changing and how fast?
Slowly. slowly. He's not as popular in the GOP base as he once was.
He certainly, though, has the Republican Party by the balls.
So far. I mean, they're talking about, I mean, they're real talk about extradition. There's real talk about arresting Donald Trump. You know, we were talking the other day, part 2 of the show tonight is to talk about what's going on in the Republican Party. And you know, what a wonderful thought experiment we came up with, thinking about the Republican voter as an individual who is obviously exhibiting symptoms of delusional behavior, certainly exhibiting symptoms of overvaluing ideas.
Let me just make a comment, Seth, for a viewer. That's singular. I know. Seth and I were talking about the other day about the sociology of the Trump voter, and we decided it was much more interesting and educational to take the whole collective, the gestalt of the Trump universe, and analyze it psychologically like you would one human being. It's just a way of taking a microcosm, taking a slice of this, putting it under the microscope, and saying this. Now, obviously, we all agree that sociologically speaking, in the totality, there is no question that there is a collective trauma being worked out. And so if we can take this down to the individual, then we can say there is a post-traumatic stress disorder in this individual. Now, where did that come from? Okay, their father didn't leave. He didn't beat the shit out of the mother. He wasn't drunk all the time. It's none of that in this individual. What they have suffered, the individual has suffered, as representing the group, has suffered a social trauma from growing up in America.
And therefore, we need to take a wholesale look at the dysfunction of American culture. And I really, really think we can point back, we can start with the work of Dr. Ken Robinson, who talked about the American educational system as kind of a factory approach to education, where kids are lumped together in age group by date of manufacture versus what their aptitudes and interests are. You know, when people engaged in in the earlier part of the 19th century, the 18th century, you know, people, before there was this idea of education on demand, public education on demand, you know, that's a construct from the Age of Enlightenment. You know, that there should be public education on demand. Prior to the Age of Enlightenment, that wasn't a thing. And of course, it has benefited some people tremendously. But it has really been quite harmful to many other people, including these people in our culture who are so divided from us now as a product of the technocultural revolution. You know, we used to have apprenticeships. We used to have mentorships. We used to have relationships between older people and younger people where the older people weren't thought of as icky or creepy. You know, older people were valued for their accumulated knowledge. We've got it backwards in so many different ways that the idea that authoritarianism would pop up when injected with the steroids of the technocultural revolution, it shouldn't surprise anyone. And then we have high school football.
Thank you. I was going to mention that, but you go for it.
I wanted to throw that back to you because I wanted you to talk briefly about the film and I found very valuable, by the way, your description of the way the film was staged and then cut. They cut to that scene.
Right.
And without explanation.
Okay, so Peter Davis did one of the most powerful documentaries ever made. It was during Vietnam. He lives up in Castine, by the way. He made a film called The Hearts and Minds, which you probably heard of. It was about the Vietnam War. And it was about Daniel Ellsberg and the Pentagon Papers and this and that and the other thing. But in the middle of this documentary, he cuts to probably a 5 to 10 minute scene, no narration, of a high school coach going off on his team at halftime because they're losing. And then he goes away from it. There's no comment on it or anything else. So what was Peter Davis saying? He was saying, you want to understand Vietnam? Look at this. And that's why I rail against high school football. Somebody else wrote, America is the result of 50 years of football coaches teaching civics. So that's what we were talking about, Seth.
Yeah.
And that for me was so amazing to watch this cut in the middle of this documentary.
I threw the link to the actual Criterion Collection film in the chat. Right. So if anybody wants to watch Hearts and Minds on YouTube, you can watch it on. I just shared the link in the public chat.
But so what Seth is talking about with Robinson and his ideas is so important. At the same time, this American microcosm, this little slice of the American male, has suffered a severe trauma. That trauma can often be a result of not just bullies, because it's a bully culture, but the toadies, represented by every Republican senator at the moment.
But I think there's real hope, Jack.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. I think there's real hope for the use of technology to avoid the inevitable conflict that comes as a result of these levels of tension.
I agree.
Because if you show something for what it is, you get through the process of emotionally processing it much quicker. You have immediate catharsis,
yes,
which usually you would have to have warfare, injury, death, mourning, catharsis.
Right.
Writ large in the public space, right? The Gold Star parents. But now we have an immediate processing, understanding, rage, resolution, agreement, catharsis. And you're watching it happen in the Republican space now. You're watching it happen as democracy works. As democracy works through voter suppression, as democracy works through the problem that is the mentally ill Republican Party, as we work through all of these things, you now start to see how democracy, aided by the technocultural revolution, is actually a great partnership that can speed the healing, expose the disease to sunlight.
Okay, so let's combine that, Seth, with the technocultural revolution. It used to be in high school when I was growing up, you had the jocks, who were the most admired group. You had the nerd intellectuals, were the least admired. And then you had this huge body of students that weren't either, but some of them were jock toadies. They were the ones that were scared of the bullies, and so they hung out with the bullies and admired them. It's really quite simple. And that goes for when I was at Princeton also. It was the same equation. This is in the 60s. Look what technology has done. All of a sudden, some of the nerds are the aspirational kids. It's splintered. So this simplistic, macho, football playing / toady fucking culture is not what it used to be. It's not as aspirational. Plus the fact that bullying in school is really looked down on. You bully somebody at Camden Hills, you're going to get a teacher grabbing you by the hair, and you know what I mean. It just ain't happening. You know,
Right. And the interesting thing, the interesting thing about that, one interesting thing, is that it is creating a generation of woke terrorists. It's creating a generation of intolerance.
Mm-hmm.
It's creating a generation of people who will intentionally mute one of their own senses that helps them interpret social situations. And that is your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
People won't see things now that help them interpret what's
That's
going
true.
on. They won't body shame, for example. Somebody who's overweight, they won't body shame that person because it's mean-spirited, right? But that person who's overweight is unhealthy. That person who's overweight has issues which are being manifested in their weight. And that's valid for humans to perceive that.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the line? That's what we're wrestling with now.
I think the line is being worked out every day online, Seth.
I agree. And I know that you hate football for exactly this reason, but there's a fascinating phenomenon that I'd like to just hash out with you for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. If you look at quarterbacks in the National Football League, it's always the tall, good-looking kid. And the reason that it's always the tall, good-looking kid is because the kid who gets chosen to play quarterback is always the well-liked, aspirational, good-looking, tall kid in 5th grade or 4th grade or 3rd grade.
I don't agree.
No, it is a phenomenon.
No, yeah, but it's not what you described. I think you know more about football than I do. I can name 2 quarterbacks in the history of football if I'm lucky.
How'd that happen?
What I see in quarterbacks is incredibly long arms and big hands.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I see. I don't see them. Kaepernick isn't that good looking. He's cool looking, but he's not. Okay.
Right, and he's also not a quarterback.
Look at his arms or a receiver. Look at the arms on these guys. Holy shit. That's how you throw hard, is to have long arms.
Hand size is a subset of the good-looking quarterback syndrome.
No, it's the size of your body, your proportions, your arms, and your hands. And I'm sure your feet are all an extension of that, but it has nothing to do with being good looking or not.
Well, agree to disagree.
You're wrong, Seth. Why agree to disagree?
The arrogance, Jack, the arrogance is spectacular from you right now. You are glowing with condescension and arrogance.
Thank you.
I mean, it is coming off you like a solar flare. You are beautiful and resplendent in it.
Seth,
it is fabulous.
Can you imagine the arrogance of somebody who went to Princeton? But wait.
What do you mean imagine?
Wait a second. Wait a second. How about the arrogance of someone that went to Princeton and said, fuck you?
That's
pure arrogance.
It starts here all the way up.
Seth is right. One of our users said Seth is right. Have him stuffed, Seth.
Seth is right. He's right about quarterbacks. No, it's a good-looking kid. And Jack is correct.
Jack is correct.
See how isn't it wonderful?
See, somebody's paying attention to. Thank you for watching. You are the reason that Seth and I can sleep tonight, knowing that we weren't totally soloing this evening.
Well, I tell you what, Jack, the idea that we have a cultural mental illness in America, I think is something that's going to start getting traction. And for no other reason then we have the ability to start speaking this language and quantifying it, the more data we compile from people expressing themselves on social media.
But
And you'll start to,
I was just going to say, the key to this is our ability to take the whole collective of 77 million people and crystallize them down into one little petri dish and start slicing it and putting under the microscope.
yeah. I mean, I'm really interested to see what that kind of, those kind of revelations. And I got news for you. I mean, it's going to hit both sides, but the reckoning that's coming for the GOP politically, but the Republican electorate, the GQP idiots, the stupid, floral pattern Florida ladies with their idiocy, sitting around listening to that fucking idiot Trump lawyer, say that Donald Trump still has the codes and the military listens to him, and we still have the machines, and these fucking people are so deluded and so willing to believe the big lie that the reckoning for them is going to be jarring, and it's going to put them in a different place. And we're going to have to deal with it. And we're going to have to deal with these eruptions of anger. And on the Democratic side, 70% of the country, or 60% at least, is really, really anxious to knock these people's teeth down their throats. I mean, really. And the comeuppance, it can't be harsh enough for these people. And the punishment may have to be permanent political obscurity until there's demographic of making of them obscure.
True, and yet the little moments of humor. Can I mention bamboo in the paper?
Oh, but it's not really a joke, is it, Jack?
No,
it's not really a joke. It's that delusional, isn't it, Bud?
It is, and using ultraviolet light to detect bamboo in the paper because you're convinced somebody told you that 10,000 Biden ballots had arrived from China.
I can't wait for them to find them.
Oh,
and then when they do find them and they produce them, I can't wait to say, I don't give a fuck. I really don't. He lost by 8 million votes, dude. 8 million votes.
Right.
He lost the popular vote. Donald Trump lost the popular vote to Joe Biden by 8 million votes. It's not even a topic for conversation, you product of a truck stop hooker.
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating, the tenacity that their psychosis seems to warrant. It's amazing, Seth. It's truly amazing.
And it is a portion of the American population that has always been a problem and will always be a problem. And the only solution is to make them an ethnic minority in this country, and therefore a voting bloc minority in this country.
Right, but not a protected minority.
No, fuck them. Fuck them. Fuck them. They have made life miserable for other human beings as actively as they possibly could for 400 years.
Mm-hmm.
They got it coming. Fuck them.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Fuck them.
I agree.
And they've earned what's coming. I mean, it's not as if anybody's crying any tears for these people and their willful ignorance and delusion.
Mm-hmm.
They got it coming. I took my signs down from my lawn and I still got garbage thrown on my lawn. That is somebody that's holding on to their anger. I'm driving on the highway and people are still cutting me off in traffic. I'm driving slowly, Jack. I'm driving at the speed limit.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing in itself.
Jack, I have been driving for coming up on 40 years, isn't it? Come close to 40 years now. I have never received a moving violation.
I don't know what that says about you, Seth. I don't know if it's good or bad. You know, I was thinking today, I've been riding motorcycles on and off for 60 years.
That's great.
You
I
talk
think
about,
what it says about me is I'm very conscious of what I'm carrying with me in my car. That I have my wife and kids with me, and I'm interested in not getting them hurt.
right, sure.
When I'm by myself, I find myself driving more aggressively.
I think everyone does.
Yeah, but I'm an extremely careful driver, and I can see I have a really good sense of spatial awareness, and I can see people acting like assholes around me, and I don't want to get hit. I've been in car accidents. It's an unpleasant experience. So if it says anything about me, my hope is that it says I learned my fucking lesson, and the sound of crunching metal around me is extremely unpleasant, and I don't want to experience it again.
I think you're just a pussy.
Come over here and say that, you fuck.
Can I bring some Dunkin' Donuts wrappers with me?
Of course, I knew it was you.
That's amazing that's still going on, Seth. You didn't let me know about that. And the fact that Hoppy's really looking for this guy, that's a surprise too.
He's pissed off, man. Tim is pissed off.
That's Grace.
Somebody says it's worse than it's ever been driving. Yeah, it's worse than it's ever been driving because people are in their own little steel cans, and they're expressing their rage. These are very angry people.
It's not just that, Seth. It's also because we all know that during COVID, the cops were much, much less likely to pull anybody over.
That's exactly
even
right.
for parole violations. Okay, so people have really gotten used to the cops not being around. It's sort of like New York City.
Yeah, I think that what's going to happen is that we're not going to have cops doing traffic stops anymore. What we're going to have is kind of a fly-by-wire technology where you'll get a ticket in the mail for going over the speed limit.
Well, England has it already. It makes people crazy with their Gazzo cameras. You know, in London, no matter where you are, you're being watched by like 20 cameras, no matter where you are in London.
And really, what has it done to the British population that has hurt them?
Nothing.
And you have the IRA to thank for that.
Well, you have a lot of things, but I'm a real fan of law enforcement through surveillance.
As am I.
And if you want to fuck your secretary, take her into the woods because there's going to be evidence out there, you know, in cities. So people say their privacy. Well, if they've got something to hide, then I think it would be maybe a really good idea to try to go somewhere that isn't being surveilled. But for me, as far as crime is concerned, it's amazing the help that it gives the police.
Well, this is what is known. People wonder all the time, what is IoT? What does IoT mean? And IoT means the Internet of Things. And when you have your cell phone in your car and Waze is up, and when your car is connected to the Wi-Fi or a satellite, your car and your phone are things in the Internet of Things. And they are individual data points. Their speed and distance and what it is that you like to eat, when you stopped, are you driving aggressively, are you obeying the rules? All of those things can be used to improve life generally. And, you know, somebody who, you know, has numerous violations for driving recklessly, you know, that person's going to be in trouble. And eventually we'll all get to a point where our cars will be able to drive without us, and we'll be able to drive on the highway and have the car make the decision about what pace to drive at. And if there's nobody on the road and the sensors are sophisticated enough, there's no reason the car can't go 100 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's congested, behave yourself, or the car will do it for you.
Yeah.
That's a vision of the future where people have an enhanced quality of life.
They do,
You know?
but yet individuals tend to look at this technology in a way. It's a great equalizer. It's like socialism. It makes life better for everybody, but there's certain people that aren't going to have the lives they're used to. And this is exactly the same thing. So it's an equalizer, and there are a lot of people who represent that. Okay, you know, the whole thing in the United States and everywhere else probably is, oh, I got away with something. Right? Now, in Sweden, people don't say that because you'll be socially ostracized for that kind of statement. In the United States, it's something to be proud of. You paid off a judge. I've heard this in New York from people.
Yeah, I mean, it characterizes the person forever, though.
It does, but at the same time, when the whole culture shares it, it doesn't. So if you have a culture of tri-states used car dealers convention, you're going to see that it's pretty ubiquitous in that context, that attitude. You know, put your cigarette out in the fried egg and ask where the broads are, you know. So in a way, this equalizing technology is hard to digest for some people who see themselves as better or smarter or more clever.
Different.
Yes.
But their narcissism isn't society's problem. That's their problem.
Well, it is society's problem in a lot of ways, Seth.
Right, but this equalizes that.
Yes, that's exactly right.
All right, my man, we are approaching the end of the show here.
Okay.
Any closing thoughts, my friend?
I don't. I wonder if our viewer has anything to close with.
Well, bad driving is a good place to end, isn't it? All right. Thank you, my friend, for another entertaining Friday night.
Yeah, it was a great conversation today, too. That was absolutely stupendous.
Yeah, I'm going to be in town tomorrow. I will probably see you on the bench at some point.
Contact me, please, and let's bench it, because I think it's going to be a nice day.
Yeah, it is.
And mask mandates.
No more mask mandates. We're done.
Well, if you're vaccinated, you are.
I got my card in my wallet.
But I'm talking in general. If you're vaccinated, of course, these morons that aren't going to get vaccinated are...
Well, they're not going to get me sick, bud.
Yeah. Well, let's hope not. You know,
they're not going to get me sick. I'm done with masks now. I'm fully vaccinated. I've been careful for a year and 2 months. It's time for us to start living our lives again.
For me, it's become, in some cases, a social courtesy. So when I walk into a restaurant before I sit at the table, I will always have my mask on. And then I will sit, but I use one of these pull-up collars, which is a lot easier. You just pull it up like it's like a scarf, like a bandito. And you pull it up like this, and then you just pull it down. Okay, Bill Martha has the COVID.
Bill Maher has the Rona.
Is that the way you spell it?
Bill Maher? Yeah.
Yes.
That's not how you spell it, but it doesn't matter.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
It's Maher. Bill Maher has and he's not going to be on tonight. So
that's an interesting smelling. I wonder what country that comes from.
Douchebagistan.
Well, or it was changed at Ellis Island from something, like most of us were.
Yeah.
Weren't you Silverman before they changed it to Silverstein?
No, Silberstein, and my grandfather changed it.
Frankenstein.
On my grandfather's side, it was Silberstein. On my other grandfather's side, it was Reichland.
And 8 New York Yankees. Is that a baseball team?
Including Gleyber Torres, who had coronavirus, was then inoculated against coronavirus, and caught it again.
He was inoculated after he'd had it once. Is that right?
Correct.
That is bizarre.
It is bizarre. And here's a space to watch for future shows, Jack.
Yep.
Many scientists around the world are now pointing a finger at Chinese laboratories for creation of the coronavirus.
I have read a couple of things about that relatively recently. And it's fascinating because I think the chances are pretty good.
We don't know, but this does seem a little bit designer to me, doesn't it?
Yes. Here is someone from the USS Omaha with a video that shows a spherical USO splash into the ocean off San Diego.
It's getting fucking crazy out there, man.
UFOs.
So far, we've closed the show with absolutely insane driving, trying to kill us, the Chinese trying to kill us,
Yes.
and UFOs invading off the coast of China, of San Diego.
Yes.
And you wonder why anxiety medication sales are through the ceiling. All right, Jackie boy,
Okay.
thank you very much, pal. I will see you tomorrow. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And we will see you next week. For Jack Churchill, this is Seth Silverton saying sayonara.